Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling the absolute ultimate ethical question. How do we actually judge right from wrong? I mean, we make moral decisions every single day, right? And usually we're just relying on our gut feelings or maybe some hazy sense of the greater good. But what if there was a rigorous, purely logical way to determine your exact duty in literally any given situation? Well, that is the incredibly ambitious goal of the philosophy we're unpacking today. Right? Let's dive right in. For the longest time, consequentialist theories like utilitarianism really dominated the conversation. They basically argue that the end justifies the means, meaning an action is good if it produces a good outcome, totally regardless of why you actually did it. But what if they have it completely backward? What if the outcome doesn't matter at all, and the only thing that truly counts is your motive? To figure this out, we're pulling straight from Dr. James S. Spiegel's session on Kantian ethics. And the historical context here is just super interesting. Immanuel Kant was this towering figure of the Enlightenment, and his goal was to put ethics on a rock-solid philosophical foundation without having to rely on church authority or special revelation. He basically believed that if you're a rational human being, you can figure out your basic duties through reason and reason alone. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to meet Immanuel Kant, explore reason, motives, and duty, and unpack his famous categorical imperative. Then we'll see why people are not mere means, cover the strengths of the theory, and finally look at its fatal flaws. Part 1. Meet Immanuel Kant, the prophet of the Enlightenment. This guy ranks right up there alongside giants like Plato and Aristotle, and he managed to do groundbreaking work that literally changed ethics forever. Moving to Part 2, Reason, Motives, and Duty, the rational animal. Kant's core premise is that morality isn't some mystical, fuzzy feeling. It's actually just pure, hard logic. Think about it like this. What is the single, absolutely unqualified good in the universe? For Kant, it's not happiness. It's not wealth. It's not even a great outcome. It is a good will. Having a good will means acting out of a strict sense of duty, rather than just doing what you feel like doing or following your natural inclinations. Your motivating ground is the only thing that makes your will truly good. So, if you're doing the right thing just to look good on Instagram, yeah, Kant would definitely not be impressed. He brilliantly connects our minds to our actions by setting it up almost like a two-track system. On one track, you've got theoretical reason, which aims for truth. Its ultimate rule is the law of non-contradiction. You can't say something is both true and false at the exact same time. Then, on the other track, you have practical reason, which aims for good conduct. And just like theoretical reason has a supreme law to prevent logical contradiction, practical reason has a supreme law to prevent moral contradiction. Which brings us to Section 3, the categorical imperative, the supreme moral principle. This is the centerpiece, the objective law of reason that binds every single one of us. Here is the very first formulation of that imperative. And it's a quote you might have actually heard before. Act only on that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. Basically, before you do anything, ask yourself, would it make logical sense if universally everyone in the world did this exact same thing? It's all about universalizability. Let's run a thought experiment straight from our source to see this in action. Imagine you need money for tuition, right? So you plan to ask a friend for a loan, promising to pay them back even though you know for an absolute fact you can't. Okay, step 1. Your maxim, or your rule, is make a false promise to get money. Step 2. Imagine a world where absolutely everyone makes false promises whenever they need something. Step 3. What happens? Well, the very concept of a promise completely implodes. No one would ever believe a promise ever again. So your action contradicts itself. It fails the test. You literally, logically, cannot do it. Section 4. People are not mere means, respecting personal autonomy. Kant didn't just stop at universal laws. He cared deeply about intrinsic human value. So the second formulation says, act so that you treat humanity always as an end and never as a means only. Because every human being is a rational agent, they deserve respect just for who they are. They have their own goals, their own autonomy. Let's go back to that false promise example for a second. If you lie to your friend to get their money, you're bypassing their autonomy. You're using them like a tool, a mere means to solve your tuition problem, like a human ATM. Kant says this is an absolute violation of human dignity. And let's be honest, we all hate being used, right? Just imagine someone doing that to you. Part 5. Strengths of Kant's theory. A firm foundation. Building an entire ethical system purely on logic actually brings some heavy-hitting strengths to the table. There are three huge benefits here. First, it's highly deontological. That means it places a massive, rightful emphasis on duty and obligation, which, frankly, aligns perfectly with our basic moral common sense. Second, it's universal and objective. It establishes clear, consistent lines of right and wrong that apply to everyone, everywhere, no exceptions. And third, it's just. Utilitarians might happily sacrifice one innocent person if it somehow brings pleasure to the majority. Kant's system absolutely forbids that, guaranteeing everyone gets their due respect.
Finally, Section 6, fatal flaws in the system, the stress test. Because as beautifully logical as this system is on paper, what happens when we apply it to the messy reality of actual human life? Let's start with a really relatable scenario from Dr. Spiegel's lecture, the hospital visit. Imagine a really good friend of yours gets injured in a car accident. Now you are having a crazy busy week, and honestly, you don't actually want to go visit them. But being a strict Kantian, you recognize it is your logical moral duty to go. So you dutifully march yourself down to the hospital room. So you walk in, your friend is thrilled, and they thank you so much for your warm, loving kindness. And you, committed purely to truth and cold duty, just reply, "Actually, I didn't want to visit. I had zero inclination. But I ran the categorical imperative through my mind and decided I shouldn't treat you as a mere means. So here I am." I mean, how is your friend going to react to that? Probably with a thanks, but no thanks. And this hits on a massive criticism. Kant places way too much emphasis on cold, hard duty. In our actual human relationships, we value sincere affection, empathy, and genuine desire. If someone only loves you out of a logical obligation, well, we intuitively feel that something profound is missing from that picture. But things get much, much more intense when we look at conflicting duties. This is the classic World War II dilemma. You are bravely harboring innocent Jewish people in your cellar. Suddenly, the Gestapo knocks on your door and asks you point blank, are there Jews inside? You have a duty to tell the truth, but you also have a duty to protect innocent life. So what do? Astonishingly, Kant doesn't budge here. Because lying violates the categorical imperative, Kant actually maintained that you must tell the truth in every single case, even to the Gestapo, even if it directly results in the deaths of the innocent people hiding downstairs. It's a complete, catastrophic failure of the system. When two absolute duties crash head-on into each other, the categorical imperative seems to point in two completely different directions, and Kant's dogmatic insistence on truth-telling leads to an undeniably horrific outcome. A utilitarian solves this in 2 seconds. Lie to save lives. The consequence is better. But a strict Kantian, they are totally trapped by their own unbreakable rules. Then there's this structural flaw, the ambiguity of the maxim. Remember the whole universalizability test? Well, critics point out you can actually hack it. Say I want to steal my neighbor's book. I just make my rule hyper-specific. I say I will steal a book only when I have literally zero money and my neighbor is incredibly rich and won't even notice it's gone. I can logically universalize that super specific rule without society collapsing. Bam, I've basically given myself permission to steal. The rule is just way too easy to manipulate. So, where exactly does this leave us? Immanuel Kant undeniably provides us with a breathtakingly brilliant rational foundation. It demands that we respect human dignity and recognize objective duties. But as we've just seen, cold logic and rigid rules really fall short when they're faced with a need for real human empathy and messy moral conflicts. Kant's theory is an incredibly powerful tool for sure, but it's clearly not the whole toolkit. And it leaves us with this really provocative final thought. If pure reason isn't enough to guide us perfectly on its own, what else is required to make our moral compass complete?